Om Vedanta Siddhanta Niruktiresha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagatya Akanda Rupa Stitir Eva Moksho Brahmadvitye Shrutayaha Pramanam. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings in the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om nicho nichinam chetanas chetananam eko bahunam yo vidadati kamam tamatmastam yenupashanti diraha tesham shanti shashvati netaresham. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. That one, the eternal among non-eternal things, the intelligence of the most intelligent ones, who, though ever one, nevertheless fulfills the desires of the many. That one the seers realize as dwelling in their own self. To them belong peace, and to none else. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karvavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, divine reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. So with these chants out of the Upanishads and other non-dual scriptures of India, we welcome you all here to the tiny SRV ashram in Hawaii, having just returned from our 2-week retreat and classes on the Amritanada Upanishad in Portland 2 weeks ago, amongst many of the devotees there. And we also welcome our live streaming audience, Svagatam, as we say. Come into our midst and partake of the Dharma, or the Jnanam, the Atma Gyan, the knowledge of the true indivisible self, which I just chanted about. They find that nestled deep within their own being, and then they get peace from that. And nevertheless, they say peace, peace, peace 3 times in order to bring peace to Bur, Buvar, and Swahar. That is the 3 lokas where transmigration is going on. As Buddha pointed out, between your ancestors and yourself. The subhumans, the humans, all here on the Bur Loka, and then the ancestors and the Svar, Buvar and Svar Lokas, also called the elementals, are there, and some of the Siddhas are there, and so forth. So these are 3 lokas, or another word in India is Akasha, it means a kind of space. And in this day and age, in this world, particularly in this Western segment of the world, people are focused pretty much just on the physical world, and they look up and they think maybe that's the cosmos up there, but that's just more of the physical world with less of the elements up there. you're lucky you have at least this one world in the Burloka, where you have all 5 elements in one place in a well-developed way, so that we can incarnate here and live a dharmic life if we stay free of the trammels and trials of Maya, and or samsara, as it's also called by Lord Buddha. So Burloka, Bhuvarloka, Swarloka, or the Akashas, you could also call them spandas, as we were just saying, these vibrating spheres. And we find that the intrepid spiritual practitioner is going within to find these. The kingdoms of heaven are within is a very pregnant statement, actually, that I don't know if it ever got unwrapped the way India unwrapped it over many millennia. But today we'll do some of that unwrapping and find some of the gifts and surprises that lie there, even amidst insentient things, because as I just chanted, the eternal among non-eternal things, Nityo Nityanam, that's the Atman, we call it, or Buddha nature. Actually, Buddha called it Pragyaparam, so he was a believer in something other than emptiness. And it's got various names and various stations to it. Words like Coivalya, which is we're entertaining today. Isolation, if you want to search for an English word. It's very hard to describe Sanskrit in English, not only because each Sanskrit word has several meanings that you have to sort of discriminate between and choose properly, but also Sanskrit is very ancient, and maybe number 3, it's probably the Deva Bhasha, the language of the gods, they call it, in which a whole cross-section of a race here on earth in the Burloka got enlightened by. So the only closest equivalent to that maybe would be Latin or something, and that's more Middle Eastern in origin. So here we have this this idea of isolation from nature, Coivalya, and we looked at the many meanings of that word last week. I took you in a boat race, they say, between different darshanas of India. Again, searching for words in English. Darshana means a way to clearly see. Like yoga would be one of those, and Vedanta would be another, and Jainism and Buddhism and Tantra, and these are all ways to clearly see to the truth. Darshana, to have darshan with yourself, really, with the wisdom that is the nature of yourself. So I think I took you racing through that. We took up this chart, which I'm just showing briefly today, so that we can remind ourselves of what happened to us 7 days ago when we took up the Kaivalya Upanisad, and translation here by Swami Madhavananda, one of the president of the Ramakrishna order some few generations back, left us a beautiful translation of it, and so that we got to familiarize ourselves with this word that Father of Yoga picked up on very heavily. Coivalya was one of the words that you'll find in the Yoga Sutras inside of the 4 padas. And we'll look at some of those later today. I've got several charts to go running through and flashing to you. Some of you who have now gotten the book Footfalls that have about 300 charts that I've created with commentaries in that book. Now I'm already into 366, which I'll show you today. And this is 365, so 1 a year. I mean 1 a day, right, in 65 days. But of course that's not what happened. It's taken me several years to try and chart the teachings of Mother India, put them into charts. And I found that it took me through 7 or 8 different darshanas, what I'm talking about here. Darshanas, these paths of clear seeing. So I want to show you how those look today around this feature of Coivalya, but it has to be connected, that is isolation from nature, it has to be connected to dissolution, how to dissolve everything. So as I was in the 70s, and I found out about Advaita Vedanta in my 20s, And I started noticing that Americans who had found out about Advaita Vedanta kept saying, who am I, who am I, who am I, until they sounded like owls. And I wondered, well, that's not enough. Who am I, who am I? I wanted more. So later on, when I began sharing these teachings, I put it together to say, you cannot know who you are until you know what you're not. So people are trying to know the Atman, they're trying to know Buddha nature, they're trying to know Samadhi, they're trying to have these high experiences, but they haven't let go yet of what they're not. They're bringing all of this mixture, this admixture into it. Like oil and water. They don't mix. So nature and the soul do not mix. That's not the oneness we're talking about when we talk about Brahman. They seem to mix for about 45 seconds, but you'll find out that they separate invariably, inevitably. So when you talk about Coivalya or dissolution, you're talking about souls who are very advanced, who have qualified themselves to know the difference between the wheat and the chaff, let's say. Great souls like Buddha and Jesus I'm mentioning here. And so they've looked ahead and looked within and looked beyond. As often one of my quips is, if you want to find the self, you do not look back and you do not look up. Science is looking up and historians are looking back. But we need to look within. And if we look within, there are many layers of within. And that's what India has been so excellent at bringing out. Those are what you're not. Like you're not the body, you're not the senses, 5 of them. You're not the 5 elements that make up the body. You're not the fourfold mind. You're not even the prana that flows through it all. And you're not even God's mind. You're the one indivisible self, which is birthless, deathless, timeless, spaceless, which is actually beyond words and beyond teachings. And in order to find that, you're going to have to drop all those weights. Like Sri Ramakrishna said, like sandbags off a hot air balloon. See, the mind is the hot air balloon and it can't rise because of these sandbags. But cut a few of those away, some of those things that have to be dissolved, and you'll find out that the mind soars naturally back to its source. So people have gotten very good at owning sandbags, you see. Well, this sandbag is going to be called the 6 passions. And this set of sandbags is going to be called the 8 fetters. Shame, grief, fear, depression, doubt. All these teachings, things that you should never allow attached to yourself. But people do. They allow these things to, they brood on them. They get attached to them and then brood on them. They turn them real when they're not real. It's one of the great sayings in Vedanta. Brahman is real, the world isn't. Or, na asat vidyate bhavo na bhavo vidyate sataha, Krishna says in the Gita. The unreal never exists. The real never ceases to be. And the truth about both of those has been known by the seers. So these seers of India, and I have to say, not just one occasionally, but by the hundreds and thousands through the millennia, have come forth with these darshanas and been supporting them again and again throughout time. It's one of the teachings in Shaivism, for instance, that Shiva always comes back with emanations to put forth the 4 padas. See, that is these 4 ways, the 4 reasons why you have to keep such high teachings in the world, even though most of the world will never understand them. It says most of the beings here are here for pleasures, because of desire, to enjoy objects, and then they're just on a loop with their ancestors. And that can go on thousands and thousands of lifetimes. If you believed in time to be linear, of course it couldn't go on more than a few hundred lifetimes because you weren't walking upright till they say that you were an ape or a monkey. My teacher used to say that. They want me to believe that if I want to see my ancestors, I have to go to the zoo. So he was laughing at the preposterous assumption that we were ever monkeys or apes. We were always this pure sentient soul who is the witness of all changes. And evolution is a series of changes. The Buddha didn't act kindly to it. He said, get out of the river if you want freedom. Sit on the banks for a while, watch it go around. You'll see that you're none of that. So this is kind of what I'm getting at with Coivalya, posed side by side with this word dissolution. To dissolve the mind stream, because the mind is projecting things all the time, every day, 24 hours on top of 24-hour periods. Then you go to 365 days periods, as we're saying. And pretty soon you're going to lifetimes. To pile more gloom on gloom, to quote Vivekananda. This thirst for life forever quench, it drags from birth to death, death to birth the soul. They conquer all who conquer self. Know this and never yield. Say Om Tat Sat Om. So in these ways, these great souls have come back to us, even recently, like Swami Vivekananda being here a little over 150 years ago. Is the Sequicentennial we worshipped with him not too long ago, to honor his presence on earth and how he favored the West, especially England and America, with these Vedanta teachings, which are so far still an underground river, but which are undeniably the truth, and I hope you'll find valid proof for that as I get going here and show you some of these great teachings out of India. Last week, so that I don't make my, well, you see there, let's see, sorry nature, you have to go. And you have to go not only in your manifested form, but you have to go in your unmanifested form too. And if you don't know there's an unmanifested form, then you just go into your mind and produce more from the seeds there and come out. It's the mind that produces bodies, not nature and not parents. The mind is doing that. You select your parents with the mind. You give rise to nature and all its objects with the mind. It's a mind-only school you're looking at when you look at India, including Buddhism. So if you don't know about your subtle body, you only know about your physical body, then you're up a creek without a paddle, as they say, or behind the 8 ball. So the Coivalya Upanishad was put forth by this great rishi called Kaivalya, and he went to Lord Paramesti. Who is that? That's the name for Lord Brahma. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva is the Trinity in our tradition. So he went to Lord Brahma, who is the projector of all this marvelous play, which he projected out of what? Seed words like Om, Aim, Hrim, Krim, Klim, Shrim, Hum, Fat, Swaha. A whole bunch of seed words out of which everything comes. They're in his mind, he thinks them, and worlds are produced. It's called the science of vibration, or the word. And it's there in all the darshans I'll show you today. Shaivism, Yoga, Vedanta, Vedas, Tantra, they all have a love affair with the word, Om, A-U-M. You can spell it O-M if you want, but it's not philosophically quite correct. A-U-M will give you the right rendering, which means basically waking, dreaming, deep sleep, or Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So I'm already starting to take apart this Upanishad, but basically Kaivalya went to Brahma and he said, teach me the knowledge of Brahman, Brahmavid. So he didn't go there and say, how's the weather? What you doing today, Lord? What you going to do tomorrow? How long is the creation going to last? He's not asking any of that. He says, teach me the knowledge of Brahman. I have you in front of me. There's no more important thing than that. If I know that, I'll know everything else. I don't have to then take many lifetimes to try and go back to school every other lifetime to try and learn things and regurgitate things I've already learned in the past, which people are doing today. This is the classroom of all classrooms. Lord Brahma is a teacher. If I hear it once, that's going to be enough for me, and I'll end my series of lifetimes right here and now. Thank you very much. And if I ever come back here again, I'll come back here in full consciousness. Should a man be reborn? They asked Swami Vivekananda when he was here. I certainly hope he will not until he can do so in full consciousness. So one's called Avideha Mukti, gives it all up, and that's Coivalya in its fullest measure. The other's called Jivan Mukta, gives it up, then comes back to it to help others. So these are two great teachings in India. And so Kaivalya might be considering which of these he's going to be if he takes another lifetime. Teach me the knowledge of Brahman, cultivated by the good which is hidden from most souls, by which the wise drive away all transgressions, all delusions, and which helps them reach knowledge of the Purusha, higher than the high. So Purusha is, of course, at the very top of the heap. 24 cosmic principles lead you to unmanifested Prakriti, and there you see the Purusha looking at it all. All the seeds that produce worlds in the Purusha, and as far as Lord Coivalya was concerned, that was the list he gave us. And we'll look at that in a minute. And by this time, of course, they know that this has all come out of the cosmic mind. Mahat, they call it. We don't have such a thing. We just say, oh, the mind of God, what's that? Well, they know very well what it is and what it does. I'm rereading you these slokas. To him the grandsire said, that is Brahma, know this by means of faith, devotion, and meditation. You will not be able to know Brahman by work, by children, or by wealth. Only by renunciation will they attain eternal life. So, right away, he might as well be saying Coivalya to him. You see. And side by side, I must be, you're going to have to dissolve this to get Coivalya. Dissolve what, Lord? Well, let's go on. Higher than the heaven, seated in the cave of the heart, shining, the self-controlled attain this, being of pure minds. They ascertain the reality by the knowledge of Vedanta and through sannyas, or by renunciation. In the sphere of Brahma, at the time of cosmic dissolution, they all get liberated from the highest apparent immortality of the manifested universe. So, Purusha is here. It's seeking Coivalya, freedom from nature. What is nature? Earth, air, fire, water, and ether. Tasting, touching, hearing, smelling, seeing. Fourfold mind, thinking, ego, so forth. We looked at that last week. This is all Prakriti in its manifested form. Its unmanifested form is in the Mahat, just generally speaking. It's in your mind. That's where you have seeds for it all. So all of this has come out of you. Hasn't come out of God, because God does not create. In our tradition, we make that real clear. God is not a creator. You're talking about the mind of God that's doing that. The Trinity, or Om if you wish, or the Mahat in this particular Upanishad. So we get that clear right away. That's clarified, you see. Brahman is not a creator, because you cannot create something out of nothing. You're creating it out of some seeds that are in the great mind. It always comes out of those. It always goes back to those. That's why there's no birth and there's no death for anything. It's just what is and what appears and then what disappears. So we've gotten really good at what appears without knowing where it came from, unfortunately. But we're not very good at where it goes to and consciously dissolving it ourselves. So like in the non-dual scriptures, na om pramadina na sandeha kim karshyami vrittiman udpatyante vilyante buddhascha yata jale. Buddhist sounds like what? Bubbles. So your thoughts are like bubbles. So what does the great soul do when he finds out that that ignorance is unreal? And therefore, if ignorance is unreal, it can't cause him any doubt and fear anymore, because that doubt and fear that was caused by ignorance is unreal too. You can't get the unreal from the unreal. None of those exist, so you're going to have to dissolve those right away. And say to yourself, I am Atma Brahma. You see, like I was telling him on Saturday, satsang. I am Atma Brahma. This self is Brahman. It's none of these things we'll look at, including all of this. This is Coivalya. You separate the wheat from the chaff, the real from the unreal, and then you can just look upon the unreal as a manufacture of your own thinking process, with no God in the way, you see. God, Brahman, that's something way beyond form. So you're going to have the experience of that when you see the great light, if you want to use a common analogy for it. can't tell a person who's dying, as I saw the other day, run them a whole line or spiel about going to Jesus when they've never seen Jesus or heard of Jesus in their whole life. Are you telling a Hindu who's dying they should go to Jesus? Confusing him more, you see. You could say, just go to the light. So I'm saying this because people come to me and say, my father's passing away, my grandfather's passing away, my brother's passing away. What do I say to them when I go see them at the bedside of the hospital? If they're not worshipers, if they haven't been inducted into and schooled in a great tradition, any of the great traditions of the world, religious traditions, then you have to say to them, the light. Look for the light, get as close to it as you can, focus on it before you pass. I'll show you that in a minute, because it's in this sloka. So, all of this I'm re-explaining. You are the reality. Meditate on the Mahat if you want to go beyond nature. There's what nature is consisting of. 24 things, by the way, keep that number in mind, the original wisdom. And here's this Divine Mother, a primal force that strips nature of name and form. If you go to her, she'll take you beyond name and form. And she liberates the transmigrating soul and grants it its final emancipation. Like, let's say, a hailstone falling in an ocean. Is that such a bad thing? How about a salt doll walking into the ocean? Sri Ramakrishna said, that's what I felt like when I gave all this up. That's called Ananda, by the way, bliss. And you don't need to be afraid of it. In fact, you might not even give up your body when you do that, because it's all happening inside of you, you see. You can come back to the body if you want. So, these inner worlds and subtle bodies here's the two highest chakras, because you wouldn't even want to mention the lower 5 when you're talking about Coivalya. It's third eye and crown chakra, that's it. The soul is passing beyond all other worlds. Bur, Bhuvar, Swar, Mahar, Janar, Tapar. It's passing beyond those chakras and it's getting up into the highest level of its own consciousness and finding itself in liberation. The gods and the goddesses are all just watching this happen. They're inside of the Purusha, you see. Well, we don't know that all the powers of God are inside of us. That's what the yogis and the yoginis are trying to find, is their powers. You see, not the occult powers, God forbid. The yogic powers are much different than those. With the occult powers, you dominate over people and commit miracles and problems like that. The yogic powers are much different. So I just wanted to reiterate this before showing you this. This gets a little bit more towards Coivalya. So we're reading this by saying, at the time of cosmic dissolution, there's that word, cosmic dissolution would be bye-bye Mahat, you see. I've meditated upon you and now open the door to me. I'm going beyond the Trinity, beyond the Mahat. I've seen who you are. You've got a beautiful set of worlds out there, but I'm going into the source. This is a soul that's very serious about merging with Brahman, because that's its true nature. It's become very sure of that. Most people, if they're not sure of that, they can even have high spiritual experiences, but they would shy away from that union. They'd go back to the body or back to the world and say, boy, I better take another look at this later. But it's good to do it before you die. This is, you sit on your zafu, you should die, as Zen Buddhists say. Have you died on your cushion yet? The Roshi will ask you. So that means this ego and this connection with everything should have given up and said, oh, I see, this is all a dream. Lie, lie, lie. Lie, 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 lie. It's all a lie. Big fat lie. Lie, 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 lie. It's a big fat lie. Give me my guitar, I'll sing it for you. So it's all a dream, though true it seem. But the only truth is He the living. The real He is none but me, and never, never matter changing. Beautiful line in a letter from Swami Vivekananda to one of his female disciples in England. The real me is none but He, Brahman, Never, never matter changing. This is a soul that's become so certain about that has achieved dissolution of everything the mind ever produced, including the cosmic mind, and dissolves itself like a hailstone in an ocean back into reality, having achieved Coivalya. So, in order to get past Sloka 3 of this Upanishad, let me show you here a little bit about Coivalya. And then I'll show you this new chart, which describes the dissolution process to a T. So if we talk about the father of yoga, his name was Patanjali. He lived probably about 140 years AD. Now that's like 650 years after Lord Buddha, 140 years after Jesus, and about 500 years before Gaudapada and Shankara, whom he incarnated with. His name was Govindapada at that time. So it's really hard to find the father of yoga's origin because he's taking different lifetimes. So is Vedavyas, to bring back the Vedanta, as those are manifestations of Krishna, Vedavyas, who brings back the Vedanta age to age. So the Hindus are not thinking in terms of time having a beginning, middle, and end, because Krishna told them a long time ago there's no middle, beginning, and end to anything. That's called eternity, by the way, and it's infinite. It's just whether or not you're on cycles or whether you can get off of them. Whether or not you're in worlds or whether or not you can get freedom from them, Coivalya. And those who get freedom from them can bring them back and discard them as they want. Krishna says what? Like children outgrowing old clothes and putting on new sets of clothes, you take on new bodies, a soul like that, without even thinking anything of it. Birth and death are nothing to those souls. They're illusions. Why wouldn't they be when everything's eternal? Particularly the soul. There's a changing eternal. That's what we're trying to dissolve. But there's the unchanging eternal, and there's only one of those. And that's your Atman, they call, or your Purusha in this context. So here's what the father of Vedanta says about father of yoga's teaching in Coivalya, in the Yoga Sutras, because Coivalya is a big word there. And 5,000 years earlier that was a big word for Kapila. I'll show you that in a minute. So Vedavyas looks at the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. It's wonderful. Those two great souls, so many hundreds of years apart, shared the teachings of India. And he says, through union of the two principles of nature and soul comes the observation of their fundamental difference. Oh, what's that? I thought nature and the soul were one. That's a green idea. That's an immature idea. You never want to be one with nature. Nature is where birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death take place. Do you really want to be one with that? Or would you rather be nameless, formless, birthless, deathless, eternal, free of the suffering that goes on in nature, free of the changes that go on in nature? So what is this idea that nature and soul are one? The father of Vedanta and the father of yoga certainly aren't going to concur with you about that. Let me read it again. Through union of the two principles of nature and soul comes the observation of their fundamental difference, resulting in realization of one's true essence. This process takes place when the Purusha abandons its relationship with matter and mixes itself no more with nature. Which is why I used our old friend here to start out the class. This is called Coivalya, final isolation from the endless stream of phenomena caused by the mind and the intellect. So mind is at the root of all this, whether it's God's mind, our ancestors' minds, or our own individual minds. That's one conglomerate mind there. Cosmic, collective, and individual. Threefold, one mind in three phases. And it's all responsible for this vomiting out of things, as the Abhidhamma says. It's my mind. I thought my mind was responsible for vomiting out all of this. So it's not Brahman then that's responsible for that. Don't blame God for this mess. You see that there's an answer to some people's problems and questions right there. It's whether, oh, why did God do this to me? Kind of nonsense. See, or why did the devil do it to me? God and devil are both concepts back in your mind, as they've been telling us since Vivekananda arrived here. So you ought to go to the source of those and dissolve them, and see that those were all dreams you had, bad dreams you had, or good dreams you had. Both the good and the bad get dissolved in this process. Because dualities don't exist where non-duality is. See, pleasure, pain, life, death, good, bad, virtue, vice, those got to go. That's part of the dissolution process, that if you don't dissolve them, they're keeping you attached like the sandbags on your hot air balloon. You'll never rise out of the earthly existence and out of the body if you don't cut those away with the sword of discrimination which Mother Kali hefts in her hand, you see. And with the severed head in her other, see. So powerful from the father of Vedanta talking about father of yoga system, right? This one little word, Coivalya. Who would have thunk, you see, that all the truth could be held in one word. That's the secret of Mother, Divine Mother. She's Savak Devi. And so all this phenomena, observation of fundamental differences resulting in the realizations of one's true nature, isn't that sort of like how we sing it in different ways? Bono chalo nija niketane. Mono chalo nija niketane. Shamshara videshe videshir veshe brahmo keno akarane. Mono chalo nija niketane. See, oh mind, he says to himself. This is Ayodhyaнаth Prakarashi. He says, "O mind, return to your own abode, your eternal home. Right? You are a foreigner in this foreign land. Why do you roam about aimlessly with no real purpose? The five senses, the five elements, all of nature, all of these are different from you. Why have you become senseless in your attachment to others and forgotten your own true nature?" It was the first song Swami Vivekananda ever sang for his guru when he went to see him when he was in his late teens. So we like to, but it strikes me that, and I was actually looking into this, if I were to take these songs in this songbook that I learned from the monks of India and start going back on them, if I just sang you one line out of each. Kali Kali Borshana, Kali Kali Borshana. O blissful self, caught in mundane diversions and vain pursuits within the phenomena of nature, why don't you utter instead the beautiful name of Mother Kali? Okay, let's turn another page. Jatone hridaye reko adarini shamamake. Jatone hridaye reko adarini shamamake. Mantuidak we amideke, mantuidak arame deke, arjano nehurahi deke, jatone hridaye reko, adarini shamamake. O blissful mind, awaken to the enchanting vision of the Divine Mother within yourself. Upon perceiving her form eternally enshrined within your heart, withdraw from all phenomena into the sacred chamber of ecstatic love and behold her there. And if I were just to keep going back on some of these songs, how about this one? Sharada Ramakrishna Name Bande Keche Bai, Sharada Ramakrishna Name Bande Keche Bai, Beshabu Ban Beshe Galo, Aha Boli Ahi Jai, Beshabu Ban Beshe Galo, Aha Boli Hari Jai, Sharada Ramakrishna Name Bande Keche Bai. O mind, can you hear that distant sound sweeping towards us? Like the approach of a great flood, the powerful names of the Lord and the Mother are storming the boundaries of relative existence, like a surging ocean of ecstatic bliss, annihilating everything. Shri Durganam Bulona, 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 Shri Durganam Bulona, 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 Bulona. O mind which constantly forgets reality, please penetrate the diverse conditions mystically arriving from nature and relativity. Ceaselessly utter the name of Durga instead. Would you like to hear some more dissolution songs? Itani vinati raghunandana se dukha dandva hamara mitauji. Itani vinati raghunandana se dukha dandva hamara vitauji, dukha dandva hamara ditauji, dukha dandva hamara mitauji, dukha dandva hamara vitauji, dukha dandva hamara vitauji. Itani vinati raghunandana se. Here's my prayer to thee, O Ram. Kindly destroy my mind's tendency to perceive duality, and remove all sorrows and sufferings arising in my mind, because only Atman exists, nothing else exists. It is attachment to nature and relativity that gives birth to all the miseries of life. I could keep going back and back. I experimented with this morning. I just all of a sudden, wait a minute, this is all about dissolution. It doesn't matter whether it's bhakti, jnanam, raja, or karma. It's all about dissolving everything back to Coivalya. Show you how crazy my mind gets sometimes. You see. So, Coivalya then, that's a very high stage of levels that you get to. You can follow it down here with me. First, you get a wisdom transmission. Father of Yoga says, whose intelligence is filled with discriminating wisdom that springs from constantly trying to perceive the self, possesses the highest dispassion. Samyak jnana. Sounds like almost like the Eightfold Path, doesn't it? Of Buddha. Then khyati comes. You get discernment and clarity. The highest type of dispassion is clarity of knowledge, called prasad. When it arises, khyati rises with it, and the yogi eliminates suffering, attains everything, and snaps the chain of rebirth. Then Dharma Mega Samadhi comes. It's a rain cloud of virtues. When Rajas has been eliminated, that's restlessness, the mind gets established in its own nature and perceives its distinction from nature, its difference. Might as well leave us out here. It then reaches Dharma Mega, which allows realization of the nature of all things. The difference between the real and the unreal, or the wheat and the chaff. The next stage towards Coivalya is Mana Vinasha, Mala Vinasha. Mala here means imperfections, Vinasha means to destroy. So destruction of blemishes happens. Luminosity of the nature of sattvic intelligence. With impurity removed, its flow is pure and proficient, unsubjugated by the presence of rajas and tamas, restlessness and slothfulness. The fifth stage, according to the father of yoga, concurred by the father of Vedanta, to reach Coivalya, which is isolation from nature leading to samadhi, is guna vaitrishnam, dispassion towards the gunas. Freedom dawns when all craving from the gunas and attributes of nature ends. So he's through with everything manifested from the mind, whatever mind it is, including his own, and he's headed for Coivalya. That's based upon the realization of the spiritual self called the Purusha. Then Jnana Prasada happens, destruction of karma and obstacles. These karmas, of course, are very subtle, because earlier, before the quest for Coivalya, the karmas were more gross, as we know. Freedom dawns when all craving for the gunas and attributes of nature ends, based upon realization of the spiritual self, the Purusha. Oh, I'm sorry, I read Guna Vaitrishnam again. I should be reading Jnana Prasada. When knowledge is at its purest, even the subtlest impediments, like karmas from previous births, get obliterated. This is the culmination of perfection and ushers in an end to even the thought of form. Isn't that sort of what you're trying to do when you meditate? They tell you to do, we'll get rid of thoughts, because thoughts turn into forms, and forms become solidified. It's no different out here in your meditation than it is from Lord Brahma on down through the tattvas, through the 24 cosmic principles. That vibration, you have to watch it. You might want to flatline it, you see. No vibration anymore. That's called ekagra in yoga, where you just have even mind. But there's also niruddha beyond that, where there's a flat line of space and another flat line into space. So even the one-pointed mind gets transcended, and there's just this bliss, which doesn't afford returning to one-pointed mind again. It's beyond the gunas, which are a very high principle, by the way. So if you got guna vaitrishnam, then you would have already been having lower samadhis, according to Father of Yoga. Savicharka, savichara, nirvichara, nirvitarka, asmita, sananda. These samadhis would already be happening to you. They're called seeded samadhis. They have seeds. Like the ego is still there, having bliss. That's a seed. But if it gets to nirbija or nirvitarka, asampragyata, seedless, that's only one of those samadhis. That's like nirvikalpa in Vedanta, or nirvana in Buddhism, or satori in Zen. Then those seeds have been burnt, like rice paddy burnt over fire, Sri Ramakrishna says. It won't sprout again. It's subjected to flames. So these are all a series of flames that you're subjecting the final seeds of your mind to, which just end in the perfect state again, beyond mind. People are still trying to just get beyond the body and senses. These are very high teachings, you see. And some people are tired of the body and senses, but they don't know how to get to a higher place, a deeper place. So, a quick run through here. There's actually one more quote at the bottom by Father of Yoga. When all the vrittis, that's thought vibrations, are brought under control and subjected to nirodha, destruction, then sampragyata, the wisdom samadhi, ensues, followed by Coivalya and a sampragyata. So it's just what I was just saying. And in this sevenfold steps to Coivalya, the seated samadhis are happening during those. When it comes to Sampragyata, they're all gone. Then all the seeds are burnt. And you're not producing forms anymore, even subtle forms like angelic forms, celestial forms, the forms of the devas and the devis, gods and goddesses, or the forms of the rishis, the forms of the yogis or seers. They're even higher. Finally, the form of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are gone. And you find yourself the only reality. You were that all the time before you had this dream of 24 steps and 7 steps up and out. So the beauty of yoga, especially when it's combined with Vedanta, is just incomparable. But don't forget the Samkhya Yoga that was the foundation of it. I'll show you that in a minute. Another chart bites the dust, I hope. And I hope it's there in your notes and in your mind. In the time remaining before our break, which is substantial, I think I would probably want to show you this new chart then. Yeah, it has to do with pillars, these great pillars. Now on this chart you see, I put this together yesterday and late last night. With music, I was just saying you how whenever they're singing an Indian bhajan or a stotram or a ghazal, these beautiful classical spiritual songs in India, which are much different than kirtan, by the way, is they have these teachings built into the words. And whenever they're singing that in a kind of bhakti, jnanam blend kind of atmosphere, you could see how they could always be talking about this love of the Lord, just like divine preoccupation and intense, sincere seeking of union. Yoga means union. So it's the same with the darshanas. So here across the top you see Samkhya Yoga in one pillar. Yoga itself, called Patanjala, by the way, or Raja Yoga. We're not talking, or Ashtanga. We're not talking about Hatha, for instance, which most people know yoga by nowadays. When we say yoga in the Vedantic circles, we mean the 8 limbs. By Patanjali, that's why he's so favored in India. Patanjala, it's called. It's the only darshan that ever gotten named after an individual. That's how powerful it is. And Vedanta next to it. Then Tantra in the middle. On the right-hand side, Jainism, Shaivism, Advaita Vedanta. Down lower, Kundalini Yoga. So these are all darshanas, ways of clear seeing, that India has gifted us over millennia and which continues to come back. It comes back why? Now that's why I was wondering whether I should show this first or this, but I'm going to flash this at you because this is how the Shaivites think about the reason why all of this is eternal. And they're going to make sure that it happens in stages. So just for now, look at the top quarter of this chart and you'll see what I mean when you're talking about Shiva's 4 padas and 5 functions. There you see Jnanapada, Charyapada, Yogapada, and Kriyapada, right? So Jnanapada is, those beings will come back to maintain these philosophical systems that I'm talking about here. They want to see these maintained in the world. And it doesn't matter to them even if only 5% of the world ever even hears about them. In the Kali Yuga, maybe less. So, maybe only 5 or 6 million people have discovered Sri Ramakrishna so far and are following him. But the whole world should be after that man. So that's how dense, dark ignorance gets into people in a Kali Yuga in a later age. So it doesn't matter whether they're being recognized or not, they're going to make sure that these philosophical systems get maintained. There's one of them called Sadakya that is so beautiful in Shaivism that it's breathtaking. It's one of the higher cosmic principles. And it's just a reading of a very high cosmic principle that says everything about how wisdom maintains itself in the world, how they're making sure that everything is going to stick here. Snow does not stick on a wet road, so most people's minds are wet roads. But snow does stick on a dry road, so if you dry out your mind of this ignorance, cut off these sandbags, cause a distinction between the real and the unreal, and seek Coivalya, your mind dries out in the sunlight of wisdom. And everything you hear from then on sticks. And you can't keep samadhi from happening to you. You can't keep that smile off your face. You see, it's hard. You have to go around pretending. That's why Vishishta said, be the great pretender, be the great observer, be the great actor, and be the great enjoyer. Because there are people who are doing all these things, acting, enjoying, pretending. They're doing it on Maya, based on Maya, delusion. But the realized soul has seen Maya and Prakriti and all that dissolve before his very gaze, her very gaze. And therefore it's just witnessing everything. I'll show you a beautiful chart on that in a minute. So, maintaining philosophical systems is one of the great works of Shiva. The other is, next is Yogapada, encouraging spiritual disciplines. The rust of households, Buddha said, is lack of spiritual self-effort. The rust of monasteries is lack of recitation of wisdom scriptures. The rust of societies is slothfulness. So be thee like a great guard at the gates of a vast city, always on vigil. So the rust of consciousness, or the corrosion of consciousness, I have a chart on that you might remember, is always being sanded off, you see. Like Sri Ramakrishna said, if a needle gets rusty, you take a salt solution and you sand it off with that. So if the needle of your mind gets rusty, the tears of devotion, you see, will be the salt solution in which you sand off the corrosion of rust. And to do it for whole societies, only those know how hard that is who try it, like Vivekananda did. But it will happen slowly, and it will gather those people to it, whom it will. The Atman only seeks that and finds that one that it selects. It knows it's after that soul. That's the teaching of the Hound of Heaven in Christianity. That's very much like that. So the Hound of Heaven's on your trail, right, they say. That's God looking for the soul. It can also be reversed. You can be looking for God. So you can be the Hound of Heaven, searching after the Lord. Because there's nothing real here except that. The real me is none but He, never, never matter changing. So you can't get sidetracked or hypnotized or put off from that vigil that you're on. It has to be it's not what they used to say, 24/7, you see. It's got to be full time like that. It's on your mind all the time, even when you're working. So, Charyapada is qualification and duties. You have to somehow do your duties in the world, use them to qualify yourself for spiritual realization. All work must be worship, Vivekananda said. All labor must be turned into love. For them, love is already the labor. Worship is already, there in them. See? It's already the work they do. Then there's Kriyapada, duties and dharmic activities. See, so that's really how to do it. These are the 4 padas of Shiva. And I won't take up the rest of the chart, although a lot of it is very good. We can stay with this chart. So I just wanted to show you here that basically you see these darshanas listed on this pillar chart, just freshly put together. Shankara says, the practitioner of blissful dissolution joins the word with the mind with the intellect with the ego with the witness with the Atman, and the Atman with Brahman. Brahman is the soul of all. So you want to find the real meaning, the real essence, the swarupa in everything, then you You fix your gaze on Brahman, and all these other things fall aside, to the side. See? Nothing distracts you anymore. You've got one pointed intention of the purest type to realize Brahman in this very lifetime, to find the goal of human existence amidst all this competing phenomena. See? You'll have to become convinced that it is unreal, that it's a dream that people are having. And it's accompanied by so many questionable things, let's say, like suffering, the problem of suffering and so forth. If you do, then you're a candidate for Coivalya. And that's where this Upanishad is coming from. So there's Brahmaloka. That's the highest land you could possibly think of in the realm of name and form, where Lord Brahma himself resides. And the rishi there is Vivekananda. He was called the foremost of the 7 rishis before he was born on earth. Sri Ramakrishna said about him. So he helps people get from the last vestige of name and form into formless Brahman. It'd be like living on a beach in a hut and going in the ocean every day. To find you just go in the ocean and say, I'm not going back to the hut anymore. I'm an ocean creature now. So you become the ocean of Brahman. You dissolve there and you forget the last beautiful little beach hut that you held a form. That was like your last causal body that you inhabited. You gave it up, poof, and you just became what you truly are. So that's a beautiful sloka by Shankara. Om Om Vachoniyacha Buddhau Diyam Chabudi Sakshini Tam Chapi Purnatmani Nirvikalpe. And finally you get Vilapya Shantim Paramam Bhajasva out of it. When you dissolve like this, word to mind to intellect to ego and so forth, you get this eternal peace, Vilapya Shantim, and you get ecstatic bliss, Paramam Bhajasva. That's how Shankara puts it in the Vivekachudamani. Beautiful. So back to the pillars. Samkhya Yoga was probably the earliest of all great wisdom systems in India. That's called Adidaiva Vidya, the original divine wisdom. Adi, original, Daiva, divine, Vidya, knowledge or wisdom. So Samkhya was first on the scene, as far as we can remember historically, and Lord Kapila was that man. They still salute when you say that word in India, even though he's so ancient. In fact, Sri Krishna says in the Gita, of all sages, I am Kapila. That's amazing. That's how important Lord Kapila was to India, and you never hear about him. So basically, you can see here that out of Samkhya came let's just make an educated guess of 5,000 years later, came the father of yoga into the body and used Kapila's system of 24 cosmic principles. Isn't that what we looked at here? Pretty much all of nature and unmanifested nature is coming out of those, listed in those 24 cosmic principles. Do you want it? Earth, water, fire, air, ether, excretion, procreation, locomotion, handling, speaking, smelling, tasting, seeing, feeling, hearing, odor, flavor, visibility, audibility, tangibility, mind, ego, intellect, cosmic mind. That's 24. I put Purusha and Prakriti down here because those were not things that are listed in the 24 cosmic principles. Those are the sentient soul and the insentient product of the soul. And out of that insentient nature comes all of this. So we need to stack this on top of each other and look at it. And who is the best at doing that? Father of yoga. When people were forgetting about Lord Kapila's system and the 24 cosmic principles called tattvas, then an age came where it had to be brought back, so Patanjali was born, like I said, probably 140 AD, roughly. And he looked at the Samkhya Yoga and said, this needs to be retrieved. Isn't that why? Now you know why I'm showing this? You know, why they come back and retrieve these philosophical systems from the ancient times. And people are saying, oh, those don't matter, you see, those are old. I have youthful people telling me that all the time. Well, that's old wisdom, that's not any good anymore. Well, then what is your new wisdom, I tell them? Is it social media is not just a medium, it's a new religion. The tweet is our call to prayer. We thumb our phones like rosaries. We take food pics instead of saying grace. The status update is our Sermon on the Mount. The selfie, our personal anointment and beautification. Facebook Messenger is our Messiah. The Apple Store is our modern cathedral, our silicone sanctuary, where new devices are announced to the fanfare of a new pope. One of my students sent that to me just last night, out of a book by a Hindu man, talking about this new religion of the media and passwords and websites and all this stuff, you see. So you're going to forget the ancient wisdom for that? Is that your fine religion, your materialistic philosophy? And that's what it's going to come to, and all the attachments that go along with it, seeking the pleasures of life? Or are you going to go back and find out what the important things are that have been eternal? The real never is. The unreal never ceases to be. The truth about both has been realized by the seers. Ubior api dushantos, anatos darshibihi. You see. So darshibihi means to see, between the real and the unreal. The seers have seen both the real and the unreal. So the subtitle to this chart you can see up there is, to know who you are, you must know what you are not. You can't just say, I am Atman, I'm Brahman, I'm perfect, I'm the Lord. I am Atma Brahma, Pragyanam Brahman, Tattvamasi, and all those great statements you hear in the Upanishads, until you know without a doubt that you're none of the 24 cosmic principles. And so when Kaivalya puts it together, he was the one who did his homework. In the whole world, he was the one who did his homework. Doesn't that sound like a complete list to you of everything that's here? And if you look at even one of those, Earth, isn't that where all the metals are? All the woods, the types of wood and trees are? All the types of plants are? All the types of soil are? In Earth. So you can't say, oh, there's much more than that. This is a complete list of everything that's in seed form in God's mind before it came into manifestation. It's called unmanifested Prakriti, you see. And it manifests later out of seeds into solid objects. What we're saying here, as Holy Mother told us when she was in the body, objects are thought made manifest. The objects came out of your thoughts. You produced them. You'll do that in dream tonight too. And that's the subtle body you're doing it in. You're producing objects there and enjoying them with 5 subtle senses. There they are. Odor, flavor, visibility, audibility, and tangibility. Those match. So earth goes with excretion, goes with smelling, goes with odor, goes with mind. Water goes with procreation, goes with tasting, goes with flavor, goes with ego. So you can put all of these 5 sets of 5, really, if you want to put them that. They sometimes call them 24 cosmic principles. But if you put Prakriti with it, it becomes the Samkhya Pradhana. It becomes the 25 cosmic principles. So everything is on your hand. There's only one important number. I don't care what kind of numerologist you are. You hold up your hand, you're stating the truth. Everything came here in sets of 5s. That's called the quintuplication process in India. And so you're going to forget that for thumbing your phone like a rosary with a 5-fingered hand when the whole thing is right there if you looked at it? All the truth of the cosmic principles that were produced are on my fingers and toes, are on my 5 senses, are on the 5 types of prana that are flowing through me. And the 5 kinds of mind that are there. And so many other different kinds of sets of fives. So all praises be to Lord Kapila, the Samkhya system. So Patanjali comes along and he says, well, in this age, we've got to make sure that you don't forget those like you have over the last few thousand years. So let's tell you to connect and meditate upon the 24 tattvas. And I'm going to change their name to alambanas, a big word in yoga, like Coivalya. Alambana means a station to meditate upon. So now I take earth and I think of everything I can possibly think about. Then I take water, I think everything I can possibly think about water. I take a couple days to do this with each of them. And I take fire. Oh, there's so many things about fire. You see, you discover inside yourself. And you do the same with air and ether. And as you do, you connect them to the 5 motor senses and the 5 knowledge senses. They're all to be connected as you meditate on them. You don't just meditate on them, let them go and go to the next one. Because that's how everything marched down in 5s. So if you want to know what you're not and where you came from, then you're going to have to follow the breadcrumbs back inside yourself. This is why they're not afraid of death in India, is because they know how they got here and they know how to get back. India has always, although it knows it's not the truth, the absolute truth, it's always been in favor of evolution accompanied by involution. And science doesn't have that. Big Bang and over, as far as they're concerned. Who gave rise to the Big Bang, or what force? They're not going to go there. So it's a huge thought somewhere is what gave rise to that. A huge thought of Lord Brahma gave rise to all that. Pow, you see. And everything came out of it. So, but let us not diverge and so forth. The alambana is the word, that Father of Yoga uses to make you account for these as being the list of everything that you're not. But that didn't really come out as much in Patanjali's philosophy as it did in Shankara. You see, he was the one that took all of those 24 cosmic principles, maybe another 500 or 600 years only, because that's a short time in India, and then turned them into, oh, guess what, that's a list of what you're not. Because he was an Advaitist. So he was saying, there's only one reality, there's not many, there's not two. Nature and soul can't be two, you see. It can't be one either. It's just that you don't understand that nature's not real. It came out of your thought process and it goes back into your thought process. You're projecting it and withdrawing it, just like evolution and involution does. You just have different names for them than the seers do. And you think as you don't know that everything gets projected out of your mind, like the seers do, number one. And when it gets projected out of the mind, you don't know that it was all your mind that did that. And number three, you don't know that you can take the mind and dissolve it back, take everything and dissolve it back into your mind. Why don't you do that every 24 hours? You project it here in waking state, that's A. Then you take it back in dream, that's you. The you, letter U. And then you take it back into M when you go into deep sleep. So, Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, and back and forth in cycles all the time, every 24 hours. If you want it simpler than that, how about this? Puraka, Kumbhaka, Rechaka, with another Kumbhaka at the end. Every breath you're doing that. You're taking it in, that's your knowledge. You're holding it, that's what you are. And then you're letting it loose, that's everything you're not. So when you meditate upon this, everything you're not, you make sure that I'm not air, earth, fire, water, ether, tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, smelling, and all the way up to the fourfold mind. I am not those things. What am I then? I am the Atman. Cuckoo, cuckoo, if you want to put that at the end. if any of you are thinking that. Ayamatma Brahma, you see. So you see how beautiful these three pillars are. Samkhya, Yoga, Vedanta. As you connect all these, connect these too. These are probably the same soul. Samkhya, Kapila, Patanjali, Vedavyas, just being born at different times. Because that's Advaita. There's just really only one soul here. And we've been convinced that many souls have come about, which is one of the problems with many Purushas that they had to consider in Samkhya. Well, I don't know if we accept that. This is great, but I don't know if we're going to accept many Purushas, Advaita said. There's really only one consciousness, and it's indivisible, and the scriptures have told us that, so we're not going to stray from that. But all kudos to the Samkhya, because he built the house, and these put the roof on it, and he pounded a few nails into it, you see. That's how Vivekananda put it. So you have to go back to Lord Coivalya, and nobody is. The 24 cosmic principles, again, Adi, Daiva, Vidya, the original divine knowledge. I'm talking about all the religions of the world now. I'm not just talking about India. That's the original divine knowledge in all the religions. Before Buddhism was, because Buddha hadn't been born. Before Christ was, because Christianity hadn't come about yet. Was this Vedanta, you see, was this great Sanatana Dharma, see, the eternal religion of the world has all come out of India. Even migration is being traced back by many people now to India. The races, we see it here in Hawaii, the names in the Hawaiian language, it's just so much like Sanskrit. I went down to Mahakala Street the other day, drove my car up it. Wow, I must be back in India, Mahakala. Well, I put an arrow there, you see, because all of this is what I could have put here. But yoga is a practice. Vedanta is not a practice, it's a statement of truth. Yoga is one of the greatest of all practices, and it's probably the most profound philosophy in the world. Tantra was never turned into a philosophy. It was too widespread and too ancient. So it just came down to a fivefold thing. I mean, there's another five, isn't it? Shaktism, Vaishnavism, Shaivism, Ganapatyism, and Saurism, worship of the sun. You know, so those five are the five great paths in India. There are many others that are connected to it, but that's where you can trace these fives. And here's another five for you that Vedanta. You have five sheaths around you, like a coconut has 5 layers around the kernel, Sri Ramakrishna said. And when the coconut gets ripe, the kernel will rattle around inside, but if the coconut's not ripe, it's frozen in there. So you have to ripen your coconut. So this, all of these 24 fits into here how? That you can see how Shankara with the Vedanta and Gaudapada too, the Annamaya Kosha is pretty much your physical sheath. So that would cover, the first 10 of these. And then the Pranamaya Kosha would be the energy that would cover the next, senses and the pranas and so forth. And then the Manomaya Kosha would be the mind, of course. And the Vijnanamaya Kosha would be the intellect, and the Anandamaya Kosha would be that ego. Of course, that would be a ripened ego you're talking about there. So you're supposed to slough off these 5 sheaths. So you get my point here? Coivalya is about dissolving. Dissolving, dissolving, dissolving. Don't you see it? These are things I took on, and I'm not giving them up. Therefore, I'm stuck. And why am I stuck? Because I fear. I've become attached to them. I think they're reality, so I fear giving them up. Why aren't I giving them up? Because I doubt that what you're telling me is the truth. Well, don't take my word for it. I can go to Swami Vivekananda. And don't take his word for it. He can go back to the ancient scriptures of India, and he said, with those, I'll prove the truth to you across the board, just by looking into my ancient scriptures of India. Upanishads, 108 of them, Bhagavad Gita by Sri Krishna, Brahma Sutras, Ashtavakra Samhita, Avadutta Gita, Ramayana, Mahabharata. All these ancient scriptures are eternal and ancient at the same time. And you go and consult them, and you come out of it with these gems. You put these gems together, you meditate on them, and you slim them down into a set of fives, and you transcend them. You commune with them. That's what Shaivism is about to do here. Because it put another 12 on top of Kopula's. Kashmiri Shaivism, two other forms of Shaivism came out and put this beautiful umbrella over the 24 cosmic principles, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So it's a lot to take on. You have to be sort of a student of philosophy, but I would say that if it's the crucial dissolution that all of the seers of India say that you should have, then you should probably start looking into that and become a true Sanatana Dharmi. Become a follower of the most ancient tradition of the world. The finest philosophy mankind ever had, the Advaita Vedanta, to quote Vivekananda. So again, Samkhya, account for the 24 cosmic principles. Yoga, connect and meditate upon the 24 alambanas, which are those same, and dissolve obstacles. How do you do that? 5 kleshas come first. Avidya, Asmita, Raga, Dvesha, Abhinavesha. You dissolve attachment, egotism, ignorance, clinging to life. Attachment, aversion, and clinging to life. You dissolve those 5. Those are the 5 great impediments according to the father of yoga. And guess where they're hiding? In your Atman? Your Atman never has those. They're hiding here. So if you look at the cosmic principles as things that your mind projected, when you projected them, you also projected some little insects into them, some germs. Okay, so if you open a gate that's been closed a long time to let the sunlight in, all these cockroaches here, fleas there, flies there. So if you open these great gates to light, all these little things get in. So if you open up Lord Brahma's 24 cosmic principles that he gave through Lord Kopula, and you let them out, then aren't all sorts of negative things going to come with them? Pleasure's coming? Oh, sorry, there's pain too. Didn't tell you that. Oh, look at all the virtues. Yeah, but there's these vices you have to worry about. Didn't tell you that. And there's happiness. Oh, but there's also sorrow. See? So all of these things are hiding amongst the tattvas, good and bad. And you're going to want to be like the ant, that takes the sugar and leaves the sand behind at a picnic. So you get into them, you meditate on them like Patanjali wanted you to do. So 5 kleshas, 4 kinds of distractions, like restlessness of limbs. I can't sit in one position and be still. Unfortunately, Hatha Yoga is not helping us with that, because what you want is ekasana, one position. That's what it's all about. So you can sit under a bo tree for 49 days, like Buddha did, or 12 days and 12 nights in the wilderness, because that's what it's going to take to find the Mahat and say, I'm going to transcend you, with all respects. Then there's the 9 impediments. 2 of them physical, 3 of them mental, 1 of them philosophical, and 2 of them spiritual. 9 impediments called antarayas, or vikshepas. Then there's the 5 aids to steadiness that you're going to pick up on. Then there's the 7 methods of mastery of the mind. Beautiful teachings by Father of Yoga. Then there's the 4 levels of yogic mastery. and the 7 levels of attainment, and finally the 6 secret gateways in yoga, very esoteric teaching that is really the Advaita of yoga to me. So that's why I say, in fact, until this morning, and I slept on it overnight, all of this had this under it. They were duplicated. I said, well, that's just not good. So I should put something there that says, yes, the Ulambanas is what Father of Yoga did for the 24 cosmic principles, so you'd meditate upon all of them. That's why I say here, taking account of what you're not. You see. You'll never know who you are till you know you're not these. You see the beauty of it? And that will give you the power of dissolution that allows you Coivalya. Passage, you may pass, you see. The Trinity will say, you may pass. You no longer need to be in the hospital of the world with all its diseases. I'll sign your document, because you said, you never get out of the hospital till the doctor signs you out. They've even got your clothes somewhere. You're going to run down the street with your butt showing? With one of those things to put around you? You'll never get out. But if the doctor signs, then you're free. So that's what he means. If you want Coivalya, you're going to have to prove to the Trinity that you're through with the worlds of name and form in time and space based on karma. I'm done with them. That's what a pure soul is. That's what a rishi is. That's what a yogi or yogini is. That's what an avatut is. That's what an ishvarakoti is. That's what a videha mukti is. That's what an avatar is. We have enough of them. That's what the founders of these philosophies, who they were. So I hope I'm making my point here, and it shows you how deep the philosophy goes. It also shows you what's necessary to call yourself spiritual in a Vedantic circle. You can't come into our circles and say, I'm spiritual, and still have attachment to base things. Still have attachment of senses for their objects. You're going to have to do some work. Drop some sandbags. So I wanted to put together, that's what I substituted. This is called the dissolution of the mind in yoga. There's dissolution of the mind in Advaita Vedanta, we'll get to that. But dissolution of the mind in yoga is right there. This is a product of, 70, 80, 90, 2000. This is a product of 40 years of my study, this chart. 40 years of studying these 7 or 8 darshanas, coming to realize a lot of things, coming to realize that it's all about telling you what you're not so you can know who you are. And you can't lip service that kind of thing. You're going to have to put in the time. And you can't put on the time on things material and expect any spiritual benefit. So keep your matter to yourself if you want it so bad. Like Holy Mother said, they come to me wanting boons from God because I was the wife of Sri Ramakrishna. But all they ask is for material objects. Where's their devotion to God? None of them asked me for a vision of God. They all asked me for objects, see. So let them have money if that's what they want, she said. Let them have it. But I'll try and teach them to use it wisely, dharmically. Dharmic money is different than adharmic money. So in the time remaining, we've taken off a 3-pillar study here. These are all pillars, and then in the middle here are these, you can see it here, Vedic, Tantric, Yogic, and Vedantic, because Vedantic really was a period that came, or you could say it this way, Vedic was a period that was quite early, the rishis who gave us the Upanishads and so forth. So there's these 2 arms, these 2 hands. So here's India, you see, I'm a pillar of light, and here's all the pillars of Dharma around me. Come and take, understand, free yourself, get Coivalya, free yourself. Become a Jivan Mukta, become a Bodhisattva, become a realized soul, because that's the purpose of your existence, you'll come to find out that that's who you always were anyway. But you just loaded yourself down with a lot of baggage and fell under the auspice of Maya and all its 24 evolutes. That's another chart I could show you. Maybe it's good that we break there if it's about time, and we'll come back and take up these other pillars. I'm glad and I hope I've succeeded in helping to bring that word Coivalya more to the fore, give it deeper meaning, and connect it with the dissolution of the mind stream, leading to samadhi or satori or nirvikalpa. So here we'll take our break.